Okay, picture this. It's 1704, and the fate of Europe is hanging by a thread. The armies of France's son king, Louis XIV, are on a roll, and they are this close to a victory that would totally reshape the continent. But one man is about to risk absolutely everything on a single, unbelievably audacious plan, a legendary march that would lead to a battle that changed history forever.
So that's the big question here, right? How did one man's massive gamble, a 480-kilometer march, end up saving an entire empire? We're going to dig into how John Churchill, the Duke of Marlborough, pulled off one of the most daring military moves of his time, with the future of Europe as the prize.
To really get why Marlborough's gamble was so insane, you have to understand just how desperate the situation was for his side, the Grand Alliance, at the start of 1704. Things were not good.
I mean, the French and their Bavarian allies were on an absolute tear in 1703. They'd scored huge victories at places like Munderkingen and Hochstadt, which basically opened a highway straight to the heart of the Austrian Empire. Vienna was totally exposed, and if Vienna fell, the whole alliance fighting France would almost certainly fall apart with it.
You can just feel the panic. This wasn't just a minor setback, it was a full-blown existential crisis. The Holy Roman Emperor himself, Leopold of Austria, was basically sending out an SOS to his allies. That desperate plea lands in England at the feet of Queen Anne, who then turns to one man to figure out what on earth to do.
And that man was John Churchill, the first Duke of Marlborough, a guy who was every bit as brilliant and complicated as the era he lived in.
Marlborough's career was a total roller coaster. Get this, he learned how to be a soldier by serving with the very same French armies he'd later fight against. He was a political survivor, switching sides during England's Glorious Revolution, which, yeah, got him a fancy title, but also made a lot of people not trust him. He was even thrown in the Tower of London for a bit, but his close friendship with the new Queen Anne brought him right back to the top as Captain General of all her forces. This was the guy they were counting on to save Vienna.
So what was his grand plan? It wasn't to just sit back and play defense. Nope. It was to do something so completely unexpected, so logistically insane, that his enemies wouldn't even realize what was happening until it was far, far too late.
The plan was just a masterclass in deception and logistics. First, the trickery. He told his very nervous Dutch allies that he was just going for a little campaign on the Moselle River. Why? Because he knew they would never approve a plan that left their own border exposed. Then came the logistics. He and his team secretly set up supply depots all along his real route. We're talking everything, right down to replacement shoes for the soldiers. And then, the march itself, a brutal, high-speed trek across Germany to meet up with another brilliant general, Prince Eugene of Savoy.
Just let that number sink in. 480 kilometers, that's about 300 miles, in 5 weeks, with an army of 21,000 men, all while enemy armies are trying to figure out where in the world you're going. The sheer guts it took to even attempt to march an army that far was unheard of at the time. This was an all-or-nothing move.
And unbelievably, it worked. Marlborough linked up with Prince Eugene, and together they cornered the Franco-Bavarian army near a small village on the Danube River. The village was called Blenheim. This was it, the moment of truth.
So on one side, you had what would become one of history's greatest military partnerships, the Duke of Marlborough and Prince Eugene of Savoy. Facing them were the French Marshal Tallard and the Elector of Bavaria, Maximilian II. And they were feeling pretty good, holding a strong defensive position, totally confident the Allies wouldn't be foolish enough to attack.
Yeah, they were wrong. On the morning of August 13, 1704, Marlborough used a thick fog as a curtain to move his entire army into position. And when that fog finally burned off around 7 in the morning, the French and Bavarian commanders looked out and were absolutely stunned. The entire Allied army was right there, in battle formation, ready to go. The surprise was complete.
The battle was a brutal, complicated slugfest. First, Marlborough launched attacks on the fortified villages on both ends of the French line. This was a brilliant diversion to pin their troops down. It allowed his main force to start crossing a marshy stream right in the center. The French fought back hard. A counterattack by Irish regiments fighting for France, the famous Wild Geese, almost broke the Allied line. But while all that was happening, Prince Eugene's troops were heroically holding down the other enemy flank, stopping any reinforcements. That gave Marlborough his opening. He personally led a massive cavalry charge that just smashed right through the French center and shattered their army.
After the battle, amidst all the chaos, Marlborough grabbed a scrap of paper, legend says it was an old tavern bill,
and scribbled this quick note to his wife, Sarah. It's just so incredibly understated for a message about a victory that had just saved an empire and completely changed the course of the war. Because the victory at Blenheim wasn't just a tactical masterpiece, its consequences were about to send shockwaves all across Europe.
For 50 years, the French army under Louis XIV had been seen as basically unbeatable. They were the best trained, the best equipped, the best led army in Europe, period. And in a single afternoon at Blenheim, that entire myth was shattered.
The results were immediate, and they were huge. Vienna was safe. That was number one. Bavaria, France's most important German ally, was knocked right out of the war. The whole dynamic of the War of the Spanish Succession shifted, putting the Allies in the driver's seat. And as for Marlborough, well, his reputation as one of history's greatest generals was sealed right then and there.
And that really brings us to the final thought here. The stakes at Blenheim were just enormous. A French victory would have likely meant Austria collapsing and Louis XIV dominating the entire continent completely unchallenged. It really makes you wonder, if that 480-kilometer gamble had failed, what would our world even look like today?